Usually in Dutch, when you want to use an auxiliary verb like willen, mogen, kunnen, or moeten, you have to combine it with another action. For example, you can't say ik kan or ik wil just by itself. You have to add something. For example, ik kan zwemmen, I can swim, or ik wil gaan. Here, the action is placed after the auxiliary verb. But sometimes you can actually leave this off. You can drop the infinitive. How do you know when you can do this? Usually in Dutch, when you have a sentence with two verbs, the second verb goes all the way at the end of the sentence. We've discussed this in the video on word order, which I'll link above. For example, we can expand the sentences I talked about before and say, ik kan heel goed zwemmen. Ik kan heel goed zwemmen. I can swim very well. You see that all of the information goes after the first verb and before the second verb. Another example would be, ik moet nu echt naar huis gaan. Ik moet nu echt naar huis gaan. I really have to go home now. Again, all of the information comes in between the two verbs. Sometimes, though, we can omit the second verb. Let's look at when this would be the case. The first situation where you can drop the infinitive is a combination of kunnen, mogen, willen, or moeten with gaan, but only if you also use a preposition which indicates movement, like for example, naar. Let me give you an example. Ik wil naar het café gaan. Ik wil naar het café gaan. Here, this sentence meets all of the requirements that I just listed. It has willen, which is an auxiliary verb. It has naar, which is a preposition which indicates direction. And it has gaan. So this would be a sentence where you can just simply drop gaan and simply not say it. So it's perfectly okay in Dutch to say, ik wil naar het café. Ik wil naar het café. It still means I want to go to the bar, even though you don't say go anymore. This is a little funny, but it's perfectly correct. You can say gaan, it's totally okay to say gaan, but most Dutch people won't. They'll simply say, ik wil naar het café. Or ik wil vanavond naar het café. I want to go to the bar tonight. Another common example, especially if you're a teacher in a school, would be, mag ik naar de wc gaan? Mag ik naar de wc gaan? Can I go to the bathroom? This sentence also meets our requirements. It has mag, which is an auxiliary verb, naar, which is a preposition indicating a direction, and gaan. So, again, you can leave off gaan. You can just not say it. For example, mag ik naar de wc? Mag ik naar de wc? It still means can I go to the bathroom, but you simply don't say go anymore. Another example. Ik moet nu echt naar huis. Ik moet nu echt naar huis. I really have to go home now. Now, the underlying sentence would be, ik moet nu echt naar huis gaan. But because we have moeten, an auxiliary verb, and naar, as well as gaan, we can simply not say gaan. For Dutch people, naar is enough to indicate the direction, and because we have an auxiliary verb, moeten, we can simply leave off gaan. Ik moet nu echt naar huis. I really have to go home now. Now, the preposition doesn't always have to be naar. It can also be something else, as long as a movement is implied and we also use gaan. For example, mogen we in de werkplaats? Mogen we in de werkplaats? Can we go into the workshop? Here the underlying sentence would be, mogen we in de werkplaats gaan? But because we have mogen, an auxiliary, in, a preposition, as well as gaan, we can just leave off gaan. Another very common example would be, waar wil je naartoe? Waar wil je naartoe? Here the underlying sentence would be, waar wil je naartoe gaan? Waar wil je naartoe gaan? This means, where do you want to go? But also, here we have willen, an auxiliary, naartoe, a preposition, and gaan. So we can leave off gaan. Waar wil je naartoe? Another situation where you can leave off the infinitive after an auxiliary is in this set of idiomatic expressions. It's just these examples and maybe some others where you can do this, so you can't just apply this everywhere. It's only these examples. For example, moet dat? Moet dat? This means, is this necessary? Is this necessary? Moet dat? And the reply could be, ja, dat moet. Yes, that's necessary. In English, this doesn't make much sense. You're technically just saying, must that? In English, this doesn't mean anything. But in Dutch, this combination of words, just moet dat, means, is that necessary? You don't need another verb, which you would normally need with an auxiliary. Here you can just stand alone. A very similar example is, kan dat? Is that possible? Kan dat? A reply could be, ja, dat kan, or nee, dat kan niet. Yes, that's possible, or no, that's not possible. Here again, you don't need an infinitive. It's just kunnen, that's enough. Another very, very similar example is, mag dat? Mag dat? That means, is that allowed? The reply could be, ja, dat mag, or nee, dat mag niet. Yes, that's allowed, or no, that's not allowed. Ja, dat mag. Nee, dat mag niet. One more example where you can leave off the infinitive would be with, ik kan het niet. Ik kan het niet. I'm not able to do it. I can't do it. Ik kan het niet. Here the implied sentence would be, ik kan het niet doen. But in this specific example, you can simply say, ik kan het niet, and that's enough. People usually say it this way, and usually don't say, ik kan het niet doen, even though it's correct. Now there is one more situation where the infinitive can be dropped after an auxiliary, like mogen, moeten, kunnen, or willen. But in order to understand this part, you have to be familiar with separable verbs, or in Dutch, Scheidbare werkwoorden. Like, for example, weggaan. Weggaan, if you conjugate it, becomes ik ga weg. As you can see, it splits apart and changes position. And that's what we call a separable verb, or a scheidbare werkwoord. Some separable verbs use the word gaan as a basis. Like I just said, for example, weggaan. Now, if you use a separable verb with gaan, in combination with kunnen, mogen, willen, of moeten, then you can also just simply drop the gaan part. Let's look at some examples to make this a little easier. Hij wil niet meegaan. Meegaan means to go along or to go with us. In this situation, we have willen, an auxiliary verb, and meegaan, which is a separable verb which is constructed using gaan. In this situation, according to the rule I just told you, it is possible to simply drop the gaan part. So we end up with, hij wil niet mee. Hij wil niet mee. He doesn't want to go along with us, or he doesn't want to come with us. Another example using weggaan would be, ze moet tegen 8 uur weg. Ze moet tegen 8 uur weg. She has to leave at around 8 o'clock. Here again we have an auxiliary verb, moeten, and now we have a separable verb with gaan, weggaan. So it meets our criteria, so we can leave off gaan. Ze moet tegen 8 uur weg, instead of ze moet tegen 8 uur weggaan. Both are equally fine, but usually people will say, ze moet tegen 8 uur weg. Another example using the verb verder gaan, to continue, would be, ik kan niet verder. Ik kan niet verder. The implied sentence is, ik kan niet verder gaan. But because we have an auxiliary, kan, and a separable verb using gaan, verder gaan, we can simply say, ik kan niet verder. There's a special separable verb that doesn't use gaan, but that can still be used in this same way. And that is opstaan, which means to get up, to get out of bed in the morning. For example, ik moet morgen om 5 uur op. Ik moet morgen om 5 uur op. The implied sentence would be, ik moet morgen om 5 uur opstaan. I have to get up at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. But because we have an auxiliary verb and opstaan is one of those special separable verbs where you can simply leave off the main portion, we can simply say, ik moet morgen om 5 uur op, instead of ik moet morgen om 5 uur opstaan, in order to say, I have to wake up at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. I understand that these constructions may seem a little quirky to you, but if you listen carefully to people speaking Dutch, you'll hear it all over the place, so now perhaps you'll understand it better. So I hope this video was useful to you. If it was, please consider subscribing or even supporting my channel on Patreon. I want to continue making free content for people who want to learn Dutch on YouTube, but of course making these videos costs money for equipment, for software, etc. So if you want to help support this channel, just like these wonderful people who are on screen right now, you can decide to support my channel on Patreon. I want to thank you all very much for watching this video. Please leave a comment below if you have a question or you want to tell me something, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.